Welcome to the Upcycle Design Lab. My name's Cindy and I craft using recycled and repurposed materials. If you're new here, I hope you'll stick around and check out some of my other upcycling tutorials. And if you like what you see, you can check the subscribe button below any of my videos to become a subscriber. Also, if you'd like to be notified when I upload new videos, be sure to check the bell icon as well. So today I don't have a full tutorial for you because I wanted to share something that I learned from my last project. In my last project I made a paper basket cat bed, but as part of the padding I used an old t-shirt and I sewed it together with a blanket stitch. And I hadn't done a lot of blanket stitching, so I watched some videos to try to refresh my memory on how to do the blanket stitch. And I found a lot of tutorials out there that just showed how to do a straight blanket stitch, and there were a couple that showed how to do corners and a few that showed how to tie off the threads, but I didn't like the way that the threads looked once they were tied off. It seemed like there were too many threads and too many knots showing. So I did some practicing and some experimenting, and I came up with a few tips that I thought might be helpful, especially if you're just starting out learning to do the blanket stitch. So I'm going to talk about how to do corners and curves and some more complex shapes. And then my favorite thing is I came up with a way to tie on new threads without the knots showing. So there's sort of an invisible knot technique. Alright, so as I mentioned, I haven't done a lot of blanket stitching, but I did do a lot of research to try to find out what tips I could come across as I was learning to do the blanket stitch. And most of the tutorials either use a fleece or a felt fabric to do the blanket stitch on, but my tip number one is that you can really use any fabric. You can use lightweight knits, you can use woven fabrics. The only thing you need to do before you use these fabrics is to add some fusible interfacing. So you want to make sure that you have the interfacing that has the little glue side to it, and then you just use your iron to apply it to the fabric, and then you can cut out any shape you want. I did a little heart shape here, and you can see my fusible interfacing on the back here. It just stabilizes the fabric a little bit and it will help to keep it from fraying. So that's my tip number one, is that you can really use any fabric that you want. Tip number two is for folks that are a little bit nervous about being able to make their stitches even. Once you have done this for a little while, you get pretty good at just eyeballing where you need to make your stitches. But if you're just starting out, it can be a little more intimidating to know exactly where to make the stitches. So one way that you can do this is by using a disappearing ink pen. This ink will just disappear over time. You do want to test it on your fabrics just to make sure that it doesn't damage your fabrics, but you can use a ruler and a disappearing marker just to put little dots at whatever measurement intervals you want to make your stitches. For tip number three, this is also a way to mark where your stitches go. If you're starting out, curves can be particularly intimidating, at least they were for me. So I devised a little measurement system here. This is just a piece of packing tape, and I've got it on the back of it is some parchment paper, and I've just done a little measurement here where I want to put my stitches, and I can use just small pieces of this at a time. It's easier to work with, so I'm just going to cut right where I've made one of my stitch marks, and then I'm going to take my scissors and I'm just going to clip into where each of these dots are, which marks where my stitch is going to go. And once I have that done, I can peel the parchment paper off the back, and then I can use this to mark around the curves where my stitches are going to go. And it also helps to make sure that my stitches are going to be even spaced at critical points where corners and indented corners are. So I'm just going to make sure that I have the tape lined up at the edge of my fabric here, and I can kind of separate where the little slits are. I just want to make sure that this edge right here is touching the edge of my fabric. And then once I've done that, I can kind of press down the rest of the tape. And then I know that I'm going to make my stitches right through these little points. And I can go all the way around, and that way I will be able to match up my bottom notch as well. So I'll go ahead and put tape all the way around my shape here, and then we'll be back to do the stitching. Now when I get to the end, I can go ahead and match up my template, so I know that I'm going to put 3 stitches at the bottom, so I really only want my template to come to about here, to where the last stitch is going to go this way, and then there'll be a point this way and another stitch going out this way. So I'm going to take this and trim it to the length that I need. When I'm done, I basically want this bottom line to match up. I'm going to trim it right to here. You can make your template any size you want for the stitches. I like about a 1/4 inch stitch. You can see my white lines aren't quite matching, but that's about as close as you're going to get. So my final stitch at the bottom here is going to be right between the lines, right in the center there. And you can see that I have a pretty even match up here as well. So if you're just learning to do a blanket stitch, this template can also help, because it's going to show you the angle that you want your stitches to be at. So on this template, I'm just lining the stitches up with the slit that's in the tape, and it's especially helpful when you're going around curves and things like that, if you're new at this. Now there are other people out there that have showed how to do corners, but it's the same whether it's a straight corner or a point or an inside corner or an outside corner. You're always going to end up with 3 stitches in one hole at a corner. So right here, like I said, I wanted these 2 lines to match, and they don't match exactly, so I'm going to put my needle where they would intersect if they were actually touching. So I'm just a little bit away. I'm going to go straight through. I'm going to pick up my loop, and I want to pull my first stitch parallel to these stitches over here. So it's going to go right along the tape edge there. Then I'm going to go back through my same hole, pick up the loop, and the line of the thread is always going to go in the direction that you pull it. So I want my next thread to be straight with the corner. So I'm just going to pull it to the corner. You don't want to pull it too tight, but you don't want to leave it too loose either. And then I'm going to go through that hole one more time, because like I said, anytime you have a corner, you're going to go through one hole 3 times. And I'm going to pull my next stitch over parallel with my tape again. And that's how you do the corner. So I'll continue around and we'll be back when we're ready to do the indented corner. It's the same idea, just in the reverse. So as I'm going around the curve here, if you're just starting out, like I said, the template will help you to know where to pull the thread to. Because like I said, it's going to make the thread go any way you pull. So you don't want to make it too tight, you don't want to make it too loose. You kind of want to just follow straight along the lines of your tape template, and that helps you to keep your stitches nice and even, because they're going to be a little wider at the top, on the outside edge than they are on the inside edge. So I just want to pull straight up from my template. Anytime you have kind of a complex shape and you're not sure how the stitches are going to go, the tape template can kind of help you to visualize where the stitches are going to go if you're having difficulty kind of figuring it out. I liked using it for the first few times that I sewed any of these hearts, because I wasn't sure exactly how the inside corner and outside corner were going to line up. And then once I got a feel for it, I tried a few without the template, and they turned out pretty well. But this will ensure that your stitches are nice and even. It takes a little extra time, but if you have difficulty with keeping your stitches consistent, you might want to give it a try. Alright, so I'm ready to do my inside corner, and it's going to be the same as the outside corner, only all 3 stitches are actually going to meet at the top here. So my first stitch is going to go right at the end of my template. I'm not used to doing this upside down, sorry. I'm going to catch my loop, and I want to pull the line parallel to my tape. Then I'm going to go down straight from the corner here, sort of visualizing where these 2 white lines would meet again. And I'm going to pull my loop to that same center point, pulling the line straight up and down. And then I'm going to go back over to the edge of my other side, and I'm going to pull the loop so that it's parallel with the tape again. And then I'm ready just to continue on. So I'm almost all the way around, but I wanted to leave a little opening because I'm going to put a little stuffing in here. But it's easier to get the tape off when the piece is flat, so I'm going to take most of the tape off. I'm going to just tear where my first stitch is. And then you want to just carefully peel up hold it kind of flat on the table. Peel up the back and then pull toward the stitches. If you didn't go right in the slit, you might have to tear the tape a tiny bit, but it should come off without damaging anything. So then you can just put your stuffing in and finish up your stitching. Now in this particular case, once you're at the end, I don't know any good way to not have a knot here, but you do want to just pick up your last stitch so that you have that last thread that goes over. Pull one thread, then pick up your, so we've got a vertical thread, now I'm picking up a horizontal thread. Tie that knot, and then I'm just going to go between the 2 layers pull my tail through. And there's your little heart. All right, so here's tip number 4. I use crochet thread, and if you use balls of yarn, you know that they kind of have a tendency to roll everywhere. But I just put mine in a plastic bag with a little twist tie that's loose. It holds my end right here, and it doesn't pull the yarn. So it's a nice, easy way to keep your yarn ball from rolling away from you. And my last tip is about starting and tying off threads, changing colors or just adding a new piece of thread when you run out. And the way I do it, there aren't any knots showing. This is just for fabrics where you're using 2 layers because you're going to hide the knots on the inside. But I did some research trying to find out how other people did it when they're tying off the threads. A lot of them weave the thread through the top and tie knots up here, but when I did it, it looked kind of junky. There were too many knots and too many pieces of thread. So the way I'm going to show you how to do it is to hide your knots on the inside. All right, to show you how to do this, I'm going to use the felt just because it's got a good contrast with my blue and red threads here. And I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about the blanket stitch. There's a lot of folks that have tutorials on that, but some people go front to back. I like to work front to back. Some people come back to front and pick up the loop as they're stitching. But like I said, you just want to make sure that you're always going in the same direction. So whichever way you choose, just continue working in that direction. So because I'm going to go from front to back, I want to open up my 2 pieces and go from front to back where the first stitch is going to be, and then I'm hiding my knot in between the 2 pieces, and I just want to go back through that same point and then I pick up my loop after I pull my thread through. So I'm just going to do a couple stitches here, and then we'll tie off and switch colors. All right. So like I said, I tried to find out some tutorials that showed you how to pick up a new thread once you ran out of thread, or to even change a color. And a lot of the folks had you tie off the thread by kind of weaving it back and forth and then tying a knot, and I just thought that was too much thread, and it kind of messed up the nice clean look of the blanket stitch. So what I'm going to do is tie my knot on the inside of the blanket stitch here. So I'm going to go down and grab this thread and tie the knot instead of using this top part. But to do that, I want to make sure that I'm holding my last blanket stitch so that it doesn't get tightened too much. And I'm going to catch the thread with my needle. And if I were at the very end of my piece and just wanted to tie off, I would just pull this loop tight and tie my knot. But because I want to pick up with another color or with the same color, I want to leave it a little bit loose. So I've got it kind of loose there. And now I'm just going to hold that and grab my thread again and make my knot. And you can tie a second knot if you want to. This is usually sufficient. And then again, I'm going to leave a little tail that I'm going to tuck in between the 2 fabrics. So there's that. I got to rethread my needle with some red thread so I can show you the color change. All right, so I'm ready with my red thread here. And I'm going to just ignore my blue stitches for a minute and pretend that I'm starting the whole stitch again. The only thing I want to do is make sure that I'm starting in the right point. So I'm using about 1/4 of an inch. So just from my last stitch, I'm on the inside layer again. I'm going to go about 1/4 of an inch away through the back, pull my knot through, and like I said, I'm just ignoring the blue for now, and I want to go through the front, pick up my stitch in the back there, or go through the same point, and then pull my thread just as if I was at the beginning of my stitching. So I've got that going straight up now. And now, because I left this little piece over here a little bit loose, I'm going to go back and pick it up with my needle and pull it over to my red stitch, just like that. And now I'm ready to continue stitching my blanket stitch with my new color or my new thread, and I don't have to worry about double threads or extra knots. Some folks also had you just stitch over your last stitch, but you definitely couldn't do that with a color change because then you'd have red and blue thread in the same spot. So this way you can just switch back and forth in your colors and you don't have a lot of sloppy, messy knots. And like I said, if you're ready just to end the stitching, I just hold my last stitch, go inside, find that little end or bottom stitch, and tie your knot there. And that way you don't have knots showing all over every time you change your threads. So that's it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. Please give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and also be sure to become a subscriber if you haven't already. And I hope I'll see you again back in the lab.